welcome to No Rose Berlin. Today it's all about network effects capitalism. And I guess to start, a lot of people today see capitalism as a bad thing. And they believe that, well, capitalism is unfair and so on. But when we talk about network effects capitalism, we actually think that capitalism is a great thing. Because if you look back at the last 200 years, the standard of living really improved by such a huge amount, and it's due to capitalism. And when you look back at companies and corporations, they don't exist since a long time. So they all exist like maybe 150, 200 years ago. And the main driving force of how business is done today was actually two things. The one thing was the steam engine, where suddenly we had the steam engine, and as a consequence, industrialization with mass production. And on the other hand, we had the railways and mass distribution. And mass production and mass distribution led to those big companies and this huge standard of living improve. And if you look today, and I guess that's the episode today, there's new driving forces that really help the economy grow. And that's basically mass computation. So every one of us has this supercomputer in her pocket. And on the other hand is mass networking and those network effect things that we only really know since since 1995 when people started having the internet. And I guess today it's all about how is changing mass computation and mass networking changing and redefining business.
That's a couple of years ago. Once I heard about it and understood what's about, these different types of network effects, from physical to two-sided marketplaces and what have you, up to recently to data network effects, it totally changes, because now you see these patterns apply and makes so much more sense when you look at these companies then. Okay, got it. So basically baking in these network effects into your business to benefit basically in competition at the end. Yeah, that's quite interesting. What I really love about these network effects is the whole aspect about defensibilities, right? So you can protect yourself against these big brands, or like that you reach at some point this tipping point where you can even break the biggest brands and embeddings and what have you, just simply because of the power that comes out of your network effects that you baked into your product or company, basically.
Yeah, and what was fascinating for me is like when we started out, and that's really the reason why I wanted to be part of NFX, is my first business, Hack Events, what was basically a search engine for hackathons. We didn't really think about it that way when we created but we ended up with a network effects business. On the one hand, there was all the supply of events and the organizers. And on the other hand, there was the hackers and the attendees of those events. And we were basically the person and the company in the middle, the simple website done in our free time in the university. That was suddenly in the middle, routing the network. And I will never, ever forget. And that's like when I really fall in love with network effects, the power you had when you were the one writing the website. Because I remember we were going to UniCredit, the huge bank, and there the vice president of innovation was waiting for me for 3 hours because I missed the meeting because we were partying the day before. And I remember that this person was waiting, and the only reason was because we had a network effect. And so one of the largest banks in the world that sponsors the Football World Cup and whatever, this person as the vice president was like, I have to wait here because he runs the network. And that was like when I fell in love with network effects. And as a consequence, we wanted to be part of NFX. And the tragedy is also like when you try to get the network effects business going, you can do a lot of theories, but in practice, it's more dark magic than really like structured stuff. And I guess that's what makes those businesses so particularly interesting.
Interesting. I didn't know about. Actually, I never asked you about how you went from Hack Events to Hacker Bay. I only knew back then when you applied to the next batch at NFX that you get accepted. And I remember that we had these first conversations where you tried to tell me about the dynamics of these things. But then once you got into NFX and we talked about, what network effects are and the different types and what have you, it just has such a tremendous, it just shifted my view on certain things. It's so strong, it had such a strong impact on my thoughts on designing these things sometimes, that you were wondering, like, why would you design the product not based on network effects? Like, why would you avoid that? It doesn't make sense. Like, you get so much value out of that, and often it comes just naturally because the way these products should actually work. So even today with television, we are, working on these data network effects that do not flatten out, because with every edit and every user that does actually edit a video, there's a new learning that benefits the whole prediction network of how a new user that might, or even an existing user that uploads a new video that he wants or she wants to edit, that we can predict even now that video, what that edit might look like at the end. So it is just such a tremendous value. And also, like I said, the aspect of defensibility, that while you're working at it, you are already building up as a side effect something that will protect your company, because the value that you're creating on defensibility is not that easy to copy, because it just gets created as the system is used. Right? Physical network effect is much stronger than, I don't know, the bandwagon or whatever, or expertise, or then what have you. That's also quite interesting, that there are different type of network effects and that they have different defensibilities and values and what have you.
I guess going exactly, like changing a bit gears and going into the details of those businesses. Like number one, I guess it's very important. Most venture capitalists and most startup founders are running their business on Excel spreadsheets. So they are like, okay, what's my inventory? How much does the production cost? How many employees do I have? And network effects businesses are fundamentally different, because what you in the end of the day have is a person connected to another person on your service, and those humans need to benefit from your product in a way that the more people are added to the network, the more valuable it becomes to your already existing users. And this thing is fundamentally about humans and not about inventory or other stuff. And I guess that's the number one thing that most people don't get right, because those network effect businesses are like, take something like Facebook. People are changing constantly. People's consciousness is changing constantly every 6-9 months. People's trends are changing. So what you have to do is to constantly iterate and keep up with the network of your users in order to constantly measure and improve these businesses. And when you take a traditional Excel-based business, like where you say, I invest so much money and it will exactly look like that, I'm adding one more franchise, whatever, it doesn't work, because those network effects products are really complicated to measure, and you need a culture of people that are really constantly looking at the different network effects, and then second, are actually measuring the interactivity on those networks to see if it's valuable or not. And I guess that's the number one thing that most people don't get right about those businesses, is they're fundamentally different. And if you look at Silicon Valley, you basically have two schools of thought. You have the Google school of thought that is all about technology performance. And it's highly measurable. Our servers faster, our websites faster. And then you have the Facebook school of thought where it's all about human behavior. And those businesses are complicated, of course. But even now, Facebook being 17 years old, it still troubles them, because the network is constantly changing every 6 to 9 months. So they have to constantly update and iterate the product. And I guess that's a very interesting point of view.
Yeah, I mean, one thing maybe to highlight here is one learning, even though we knew about the network effects and especially the data network effects, was that even if you don't change or improve your product, once people use your product and they love it and they have tremendous value and what have you, the data network effects, or in general, the effects make your product more valuable over time just by users using it. Even if you don't change the code or don't change the features and what have you, the value grows as people are using it. And that's what I think is so interesting, because you are not not necessarily investing like in terms of like new features, changing code and what have you, but the value, just because people are using it, is getting bigger and bigger, because the learnings from, let's take the example of television AI, where we learn from every edit. There is a reason behind it. There are certain patterns and what have you that we learn from, and then the whole network of users benefits from. Even though we don't change the code for a week, let's say, because people are making edits and like executing and creating new predictions and making corrections and what have you, and then all the usage is tracked and what have you, and then we learn these patterns, the value overall of the company is growing, because the brain, let's say, the network effect, the network basically is getting bigger and more sophisticated as people are using it. And you don't change even the product. Like, you don't write even a single line of code, but the value is growing as you learn more and unlock more patterns in video editing as people use it. But you haven't changed anything, but it grows. And it's super tangible. You can actually measure the quality getting better. And again, you haven't changed any code. It's just that you have baked the data network effects into your company or your product, let's say.
Yeah, I guess that's the interesting of those data network effects. And currently, people believe they are pretty weak as a network effect. So they believe a protocol network effect is actually more defensible. But to be honest, I don't know yet, because like when you look at the data learning effects, you have this escape velocity, where the more people are using it, the better it gets, and it gets like 100 times, 1,000 times better because people use it. I think it's underrated. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing. Maybe another thing about network effects, what is critical implementing it. What I noticed is it's very hard to brainstorm about network effects. It's very easy when you see that you have it. So actually, as an investor, I'm not so much interested in people who tell me that they think they want to have network effects. I'm actually looking for the people who already got them working on. And then I'm getting really curious about it. And I get this point like where I'm like post network effect market fit. I'm trying to invest post then, because what I learned in the past is it's very hard in theory to get those things in practical right. Like, you can define it in theory, but then to get it actually right in practice is super hard and totally random. And actually, I'm really looking behind, is there already a network effect in place? And not so much, oh, do they have the potential to build a network effect? So example of your television AI, like the data network effect, can you already see it? Because the moment it's there, you can see it in the data. And that's like where I'm personally, I think a lot of investors today, they heard of network effects. A lot of founders, they write it on the pitch deck because they believe it's important to be a tech company. But actually, I want to see it in the data and the cohorts and the user interactivity or the product value. I want to see the network effect. And even if it's just small, that's what I really care about.
So would you say, so just thinking about from an investor's point of view, you're saying basically it's hard to predict the potential, basically, because even if you have linear growth in, let's say, user base, and you are, let's say, make it simple, like you're a social network and what have you, the growth and how big or how strong the exponential growth is not just, it's hard to predict, because it depends also not just on the type of network, but also on the type of features that are like put on top of that network. So let's say, think about something like a Twitter or Facebook, where you have such like low value benefit like features, but you understand that social network, they can have these strong exponential growth, even if your user base has linear growth, right? So you're just adding 10 users per day or whatever. The degree of how strong the exponential growth is hard to predict because it depends on how you utilize or how well people can utilize your features on top of that network. Is that why it's so hard to predict then?
Yeah, I guess like the core idea is really a lot of people are talking about network effects, just like how a lot of people are talking about AI. But it is an effect. And so whenever there's an effect, you should see it, because otherwise it's not there. It's there or it's not there. And you have to be, as an investor, extremely tactical when you say, I only invest after the network effect is already there. And I'm personally, so I give you an example with OnDeck. What's the network effect here? There's many things, but what would be one tactical example is how many people have added OnDeck to their bio in LinkedIn, on Twitter. So is it like 0 people? Is it 10 people? Is it 100 people? What's the percentage of people that are OnDeck fellows who put it into their bio? And it's like the tribal network effect, but you can measure it. You can see it. Also, new cohort, how fast are people actually adding up their how often do they edit and update their profiles? And it's even on other networks, it's visible, but you see is there a tribal network effect or not. And a similar thing is like when you look at marketplaces where you have supply-demand things, try out the product and see how fast are people responding, how much is the liquidity on the marketplace. Like when you take an Uber, like how fast is the pickup time? And I guess being extremely tactical about the network effects as an investor, and then actually investing post-network effect, because it's still, as you mentioned, like the way the network grows, it's still so hard, but for 90%, maybe 99% of startups, there's never a single network effect created in their entire.
Yeah. So it depends on how you utilize it, and actually do you have the prerequisites in order to make it kick off basically the effect. That's interesting. Just to get back to this example of data network effects, there was this great video from NFX where they explained like the comparison between, I don't know, Netflix that you would think has also a data network effect, and with Waze having a much stronger data network effect with every route and every type of condition on the road and what have you, where people feed the system and make the data network effects much stronger. While Netflix doesn't have that type, because it's flattening out basically the effect, right? So it's not continuously growing basically. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So how do you approach it then? Like, how do you then look at companies, and let's say you want to make a decision on when to invest, and does it actually have it that the startup has these effects at some point? How do you approach that? How do you measure that? Do you wait to figure it out? You can't, I mean, even especially as an angel investor, you can't wait forever. What's your approach or is there actually any approach?
No, it's very simple. I only invest in startups that already have a network effect. And when it's there, you can see it and measure it. And when it's not there, we pass on the investment. Of course, we give some advice of, hey, did you ever think of network effects or so? But, or do you think of this one? Or like, how could you change your go-to-market and stuff? But actually, we really look dedicated to only invest in startups that already have the effect proven.
Interesting. So you say basically, if they would have figured that out already, it would be it would come in a small version or shape, but you would see it anyway. Like the same thing, the same type of effects. It would just scale out basically later with more money, and then you grow the user base. The effects would be the same anyway. So you say, if you see that already, you should see that already in their product, and that's how you then make the call, basically, right? Or you say, I could also imagine, I'm not an investor myself, but I could imagine that you then say, well, it is so close to actually make this network effect happen or implement it, or even they'll know about it, but once you tell them and point them to it, they could easily implement that, and then it might turn into investment at some point.
Yeah, like, I guess here's the thing, like, and that's like the really technical element here. Like, this network effects capitalism is brand new. Like, we all try to figure it out right now. And of course, over the last 20 years, we learned a lot on the internet, what works, what doesn't. What we are looking for is like startups that already have an effect. And then, of course, looking at the mistakes of the product if it's not built from a network effects first perspective. So take an example, like the profile. Does it have, how is the profile of the user set up? Is the profile of the users just a random profile, or is the user profile something that is actually facilitating the network effect in a better way? So, for example, Instagram, what's the number everyone cares of is how many followers do I have? Does the product already have this feature in or not? Another one is, if you look at just another example of physical network effect, look at gorillas. Okay, every single city has warehouses, and those warehouses are in different streets. And so basically what they do is they build a physical network effect over the city. And that's obvious. But now what else can they do in order to add up other network effects? So they started with the physical, what is making a lot of sense. But what other things can they do? Can they start with a brand network effect? That's why it's called gorillas. That's why the name is so important, that everyone talks about it, that it's no longer, hey, I go to the supermarket. No, I just use gorillas. And that's going to be the category. So it's already in the word. Every single person makes the product more valuable. Then what else can you do? Supply demand. Can you build an advertising business on top of that? So, for example, in gorillas, what makes it really interesting is that, of course, the inventory is going to be an ad-based system where they're going to make a lot of money with advertising, because what products actually will be on top? What are the products that are recommended? So here you have supply and demand, because all of those different products are competing for attention and buying behavior. So actually you can make a lot of innovations here, and look at other products like Amazon, where they have this sponsored model, where they basically have the marketplace for that, ad marketplace. And so looking at all of those things, you see all of the potential, how you could add up network effects and make them stronger. But what I learned in the past is, just like when people have network effects in their pitch deck, at least they should have one network effect a bit working. And that's what I learned from my experience. It's so hard to make them work artificially, but when they're there.
So if someone listens to this later,
okay.
Yeah, I sometimes think like people interact with the outer layer of these network effects, right? So yeah, you go to eBay because pretty much anything that you want is you can find it, like some comic book from the 70s and what have you. But most people don't think about what's the origin that this actually is so strong. Like, why are they still around? Isn't it that Amazon is used for all of it? And so I think most people, even startups, they interact and know about the effects of effects, but interact with them. But they most of them don't even go beyond that. Look after behind the curtain and understood the dynamics there. And like you said, you're all just still studying it. So there's, I don't know, 15 network effects or something, or even more. And I would say I'm probably only looked into the detail of like half of it or something. So there's still a lot of stuff to study. But once you tell people, and I had the same experience, there's two types of people. One, they say that you look at it from this point of view and they think I'm doing some kind of crazy, I'm telling them about some crazy mathematics, statistics or whatever. And it's not very important, they think. But then there's sometimes these few people that understand it and they say, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. And that's the value, and this is the impact on the company, and maybe I should think about these type of function or features that will enable these effects in favor of my company. There's always these two type of people. One is really denying it and looking at you like you're telling them about some crazy stuff, that you're like the crazy guy on a blackboard trying to connect the dots and make up some stuff. And then there's these people who say, actually, that's something very tangible and I can actually touch it and I see that this is the effect. That's why it happens like this. And then if you look at, once you understand that, you look at these different companies and you say, of course people go there and of course they use this product and what have you, because you see the inner network effects. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this like for hours. I think we did in the past already. Maybe we do a few more of these, maybe with specific network effects. Like maybe let's talk about physical or protocol or data network effects. I would love to do one episode on that one. But I think, yeah, let's wrap up maybe, Christian. Anyway, that was great. Let's wrap it up and then speak to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.